Hi, Steve Sterling here from the End Time Prophecy E-Course website and the End Time Prophecy E-Course Facebook page and YouTube channel. Welcome. In this video, I'll be speaking about a comparison of the description of the beast and his activities in Revelation 17 with a description of the beast and his activities in Revelation 13. I believe that the main reason why people are not getting this prophecy correct is because of a lack of recognition of the similarities between what the Bible says of the beast in Revelation 13 and what the Bible says of the beast in Revelation 17. And I'm not giving you the similarities just for you to see that there are similarities between the two chapters. But I'm going to demonstrate that recognizing these similarities will help us to get a better understanding of the overall theme that is being presented in both chapters. But before I get into that comparison, I would like to bring your attention to the reason why the narrative in Revelation 17 is given. Now, I want you to just take a look at Revelation 17 and verse 1, and we are going to see what the angel intends to reveal to John. Here is what it says. And there came one of the 7 angels, which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will shew thee the judgment of the great whore, that sitteth upon many waters. So, the purpose of this narrative is to reveal the judgment of the great whore. In other words, it is going to tell us how Babylon will be judged. But I want you to recognize that this revelation came as an expansion on a particular verse in Revelation 16. Now, I want to look at the Bible's description of events that came under the 7th plague. Revelation 16, and we're going to start from verse 17. And the 7th angel poured out his vial into the air, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne, saying, It is done. And there were voices, and thunders, and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake, and so great. And the great city was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And great Babylon came in remembrance before God, to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. This is the verse that is being expanded on in chapter 17. Remember, this judgment is supposed to come after all 7 plagues are fallen. And therefore, what we are seeing in Revelation 17 is a description of how Babylon will receive her judgment. So, this woman that we are seeing here will receive judgment. But the 7 plagues is not that judgment. Certainly, she will receive judgment under the 7 plagues. But that's not the judgment that the Bible is speaking of here. It is clearly a different set of punishment. So it is kind of a double whammy. She will receive judgment in the 7 last plagues, plus this particular judgment that the Bible is here talking about. You understand what I'm trying to say? So, just to give you a summary of the whole event concerning the judgment of Babylon. As I said before in a previous video, the judgment of Babylon will come in the form of the 10 kings hating her. They will burn her with fire and eat her flesh, according to what the Bible says. I think it's in verse 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. And we look at that event already. Okay? So, it is the 10 kings who will hate the whore and burn her with fire, and that will be allowed by God as a judgment upon the woman. And I also told you that the judgment of the woman will mean the judgment upon the beast as well, because the beast is the king of Mystery Babylon. Just like how Nebuchadnezzar was the king of ancient Babylon, the beast will be the king of Mystery Babylon. So with the destruction of the woman comes the destruction of the beast. So therefore, when we look at Revelation 19, we will see where the beast and the false prophets were captured and they were cast into a lake of fire. and that will be at the second coming of Christ. That is basically what the judgment will be in totality. The woman will be judged, and then, consequent to the woman being judged, the beast and this false prophet will be killed. Okay, now, one of the reasons why a lot of prophecy students are having problems interpreting this prophecy is because, one, we do not allow the interpretations that the Bible gives to guide us. In other words, while we recognize the interpretation, we don't follow them strictly and allow them to guide us and provide for us a key to an understanding of the prophecy. So that is one reason. And reason number two is we are not recognizing the similarities between the beast and his activities in Revelation 17 and the beast and his activities in Revelation 13. In other words, we don't properly recognize the similarity in descriptions of the beast in both chapters. And because of that, we have confused ideas as to who or what the beast is. Because I hear some prophecy students saying that the beast is a symbol of a system. The beast is a symbol of a political entity. And things like that. You see, it's like we are ignoring what the Bible tells us concerning who the beast is. And the Bible did tell us. Now, the first point of comparison between the beast of Revelation 17 and the beast of Revelation 13 is the fact that both beasts have 7 heads and 10 horns. You cannot miss that. If you read Revelation 17 and 13, you will see both descriptions. And every prophecy student will acknowledge that. The next point of comparison is found in verse 8 of Revelation 17. It says, "And the beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is." Now, there is something in Revelation 13 that compares favorably with the latter part of this verse. Let us look at Revelation 13, and we are going to start to read from verse 3. It says, "And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" Now, here is a scenario where all the world wondered after the beast. And Revelation 17 clearly tells us that this is a beast that all the world will wonder after. Right? Remember, that's what the latter part of verse 8 tells us. Now, let us look at another verse in chapter 13 that compares even more favorably with what we have read in chapter 17. It says, "And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world." Remember what verse 8 says. Verse 8 says that all that dwell upon the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. In verse 8 of chapter 13, we are now being told that all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life. And remember, we have already been told in verse 3 that all the world shall wander after the beast. So that is another point of comparison. All that dwell upon the earth shall wander after the beast, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Okay, I am going to give a third point, but I want you to look at the interpretations given, starting from verse 9. "And here is the man which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth, and there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was, and is not, even he is the eighth, and is of the seven, and goeth into perdition. Now, the first thing that we must recognize in this interpretation is that the 7 heads have dual interpretations. It means 7 mountains and 7 kings. Okay? Out of the 7 kings, 5 shall die. The Bible said 5 are fallen, meaning 5 shall die. 1 is reigning, the other is not yet come. Now, it is quite clear that John is not speaking in the scheme of real time. So, when he says 1 is, he's not speaking of a current ruler in his time. No, he's not speaking in the scheme of real time. He is speaking in the scheme of the vision, right? Or he is speaking in the scheme of the time when the vision is to be fulfilled. Because remember, this narration is being given by one of the angels with the vials. And you know, the angels with the vials are the ones who pour out the plagues. So this is clearly an end-time prophecy. We cannot miss that. Okay? So, when he says 1 is, he's speaking of a current ruler in the scheme of the vision. And then he said the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. Then verse 11 now gives us the interpretation of who the beast is. It says, and the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth. Now, the word eighth there is a presupposition, or it's an implication that there is an antecedent of 7 kings in the passage, right? Remember, the antecedent in the passage is about 7 kings, and the Bible is here saying to us that the beast will be the eighth. So if the antecedent is 7 kings and the beast is the eighth, then it simply means that the beast will be an 8th king. But listen to this part. Even he is the 8th and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. Now, clearly, this statement is not intended to be logical, because a king cannot be an 8th but is one of the 7 at the same time. So, that's the reason why from verse 9 it says, here is the man which has wisdom. In other words, there is a need to exercise great wisdom in order to understand this prophecy. It is not to be interpreted in a logical way, because the Bible did not even give us a logical statement. So, we need to now look at Revelation 13 to see if we can make sense of the statement. Now, here's what Revelation 13 says. Revelation 13, and I'm going to read from verse 3. Remember, it's the same beast that has 7 heads and 10 horns. Here's what verse 3 says. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Now, remember now, one of his heads, based on the interpretation that we have in Revelation 17, one of his heads means one of the kings, because the 7 heads are 7 kings. One of his heads were as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Now, the same king, who is one of the 7 kings, he was not only wounded, but he was healed. The same king that was wounded got healed, and as a result, the world wondered after the beast. But who is the beast? The beast is the 8th king. That's what the Bible says. So this beast, who is the 8th, is one of the 7 heads. Now, I'm going to stop here, because in the next video, I am going to explain even further how this prophecy is now fulfilling and how it will come to its conclusion. I'm going to demonstrate the way in which the succession is now taking place in the papacy exactly as the Bible predicted it. And let me tell you something. If you don't believe that the papacy is going to fulfill Revelation 13 and 17, you're simply not studying history. And you're not studying the prophecies of Daniel, because the prophecies of Daniel clearly tells us that the same power that came up after the Roman Empire is broken up. The same power that came up after the 10 kings is the same power that will arise in the last days to persecute the people of God and go into perdition at the second coming of Christ. But if you are interested in further studies of this and other end time subjects, you can check out my End Time Prophecy e-course. It can be downloaded at www.prophecyecourse.com. You can also check out my free book, which gives insights into the course. This is Steve Sterling, signing out.